Hey fam, it's Ashleigh Chevalier here with Brittany Frompovich, or Lady Bass, as many of you may know her, and this is the Unmasked podcast, blah, 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 blah. We have a lot to talk to you about today, specifically about our latest collaborative recording and release, Mary Did You Know, a traditional that I thought was a lot older than it actually is. Turns out it was written in the 80s by a pastor. I tend to, I have a thing for pastors. I'm married to one. I thought that was a good joke. You may or may not like my flavor of humor, but I thought it was funny.
I thought it was great. I just learned something about him, so I did not know.
Yeah, Mark Lowry, I think it was 1982. He drafted that. I don't know much more about it, but it has always been such an enchanting song, and it has the. I said this on one of the recordings after it, that it really kind of pulls the modern into the blues. Right? Like it takes that traditional folk stamp and brings it 1900s. Anyway, I randomly called Brittany up and I was like, yo, actually it was a text. Yo, come record this with me. And I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So I was in the middle of playing Godspell at UMW. We had a lot going on those few weeks. So thanks for having me on that. It was a delight, honestly. And we just had to work out the logistics around that. Get the studio time had to be pushed back a little bit. It fell right on the beginning of closing weekend for that show. And that show had its own things going on.
It was a tight run.
It was a good run. It's had its own moments and things. I'll leave it at that because that's its own little world. A good family though, a good pit musician. I talked to my MD and he was like, I trust you, you're a professional. So went down, you gave me the song, asked for Upright. I said great. We had a conversation.
So good.
It was, and it was organic, which is what I really liked. Like we had some ideas about going into it, but it really kind of evolved on the spot. Let's see.
I think that's the beauty of live recordings, though. You can't always pull it off. You do have to have a certain level of familiarity with the song and musicianship to achieve that. Like, because we didn't go in rehearse together, but we've played enough together that in the song was not complicated. It's a pretty straight ahead track. Yeah.
I was getting comments after, and I hadn't even related this to you yet, that one person in particular was like, how are you playing along with her without looking at her? And it was just kind of like, I played enough with you. It took like a run or two to get it, but I could settle into how you're going to phrase things. And I wrote back and I said, use your ears. But thinking about that later, it was a quick response over text, but really it's using your ears and having that, like, you play with somebody long enough, you kind of know how they think, you can anticipate how they phrase, you know how they style things. It's that ESP that happens after a while when you just surround somebody, you know?
That is true. I think, especially though, if you are a practicing live musician like you are, you know, there's studio musicians and then there are live performers, and then especially me, because I've done so much in the blues world with improvisational stuff and just getting thrown in the fire with a band that may or may not know music, and had to lead groups where, you know, it was a blues thing where people were supposed to be able to follow along and maybe they couldn't, and you have to keep holding or compensating. Those are all like skills that you sharpen and hone, and you do learn to pick up on patterns quickly so that you can adapt in the moment. But all of that is only possible when you have a base skill for what has to happen in the track itself.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because if you don't have, like, otherwise there's like this gap between, you just won't achieve the quality that you need.
And there's also another thing too that's worth mentioning, and I think this just comes over time. When you mentioned that, I was thinking back to some other jam sessions, but having the self-awareness that the job is to make the other person look good, you know, and sound good. That's why I'm there. That's why I'm there. Whether it's a beginner or you.
Well, I think you and I are both music teachers, so we understand that differently. Yeah. Like, your ego takes a different role in you really do you have to become humble to the song and to the dynamic of the tune. And even that was, so as a singer, I still have to be humble to the phrasing of the song and what the song is doing. And I actually that was a harder track for me to record, because even though I say it was simple, sonically it was different for me. And I was like having breathing issues with my asthma that day. It was just like really bad at the end of the fall. But I was able to I feel like every time I go in the studio, I learn something new, and sometimes it just kicks my butt, you know? And it did a little bit, but it was a great experience. And I really thought, like, at Soul Haven, there was like, how many mics were set up? Like, Johnny's always got all this, like this gold mine of mics surrounding us. It's like,
I know for me, the bass setup that I could tell from where I was at, I have a Myers pickup that he ran into some kind of Avalon preamp. So much that I was like, what did I do to deserve that? Thank you, sir. With 2 AKG mics. They look to be AKGs, so you could always ask him later. That was what I was guessing by the profile. And he set them up in a way so we could get the timbre of the bass, but he also set one up high so we could get some of the finger sound of the notes and the fingers interacting with the bass and the sound of the strings on the board. Things like that, little subtle nuances that make it real for a performer. Not exactly sure what was on your guitar, but that's what I had.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I do think in the track you can hear all of that. You can hear the fingers on the frets and everything, which really adds to that dynamic. But he just mic'd, I think, well, he's recorded me acoustically with just guitar and my voice enough that he's kind of learned where to set them for bleed and my stroking style when I, am plucking along with.
Yeah.
Which, I've been criticized for finger picking and not playing a pick because it's not as accurate, but I really like the hand texture and like just feeling the instrument. I always get a little, it's the same reason I don't like to wear shoes. Like, I just like to touch, like feel where I'm at.
It's probably grounding.
It is. Yeah. I think that's a part of it, but he just really knows how to work all those microphones. And I mean, every time I go in there, it's like this plethora, and I'm like, look at all these microphones, drool. And I don't even know like the glory of it all. I don't know the names of them like you do. You're like, I had an AKG builder. I'm like, okay. Well,
you missed the part where I was like, looked up. I was like, oh, you built that soundproofing yourself. Is it Rockwall? It's just like, yeah. So you missed that whole cover. I was following around. He took me back to the other one. I was nerding. He was definitely like, he introduced me to the other gentleman. He was like, she's got a home studio. And I like walked in and was like, oh, okay. Those are nice speakers.
I mean, he's legit. He definitely knows what he's doing. Anyway, it was a kind of like, it's interesting because 2 months later, I'd gone in and recorded 10 tracks. Literally 10 songs in less than 7 hours, and got them in 1 or 2 takes. And this one took like 12 takes for one song.
But if the thing I watched in the video, and no one's gonna know this until after they see the podcast, is you would not know you were having asthma or breathing issues that day. Like, that's the thing. Like, you handled that like a pro. You really did. Like, the delivery is amazing.
Well, I think that comes from, I think that's what I was kind of getting at earlier, not tooting my own horn, but just kind of saying, like, you have to achieve a certain aptitude and proficiency in your instrument and in your song, like, and in your skill. I think maybe we mirror in this before we hopped on. We were talking about, like, classical skill and modern contemporary skill, and we both have that, right? Like, we're both classically trained musicians. And I think it just kind of so that theory base and that in the skill set in our instrument is broader, but it also can make it harder to kind of rein in on like or hone in on one specific genre, which I started writing pretty just folk style, leaned into the blues for a while, went into reggae for a while, knew I would never be a reggae artist, but just experimenting with these like rude sounds and always having this like hard rock bend. And kind of like you've done a couple of recordings. We've done a couple of recordings on my upcoming album next year, which is finally almost done. There's just a couple of things I have to fix. In listening to it, it's 16 tracks, 14 tracks. And they are all they all hinge on one roots hook, right? And it swings around the blues and reggae and rock and some acapella. It's just been a decade of recording all of that. And my deepest reflection before I go into the stories behind all of it, which I'm not going to do today, is like it really is an exploration of literally like 15 years of songwriting and journeying through musical roots. So I had like this point where I was like, man, am I missing some cohesion, or do I really just allow the music to tell the story? You know, like,
I vote two, but I like albums that have a lot of diversity.
yeah, but that's because you're a musician.
Fair. But, I mean, if that's the artistic expression, if that's how it comes out, then, that's how it comes out.
Well, how do you feel about I mean, I feel like you've got a pretty strong style and sound for yourself. When you hit the stage for bands like it is Brittany on the bass.
It is, but, I mean, it depends on the gig, too. I've had people come and hear me play. There have been other things I've played, and I've had people say, you sounded nothing like you, and I said, that wasn't the gig today. The gig today was to sound like this genre, this bass player, this thing. And there are other things, yeah, you can hear, oh yeah, that's that snarly, tone that cuts through. And then if I do stuff solo, that can look even different than all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
They're just channels of expression. And I think that what makes it hard culturally is when people show up multifaceted like that. We're kind of in a culture that likes to, it's this and it's easy to understand. And look at Van Halen when we switched up lead singers, right? And it changed and it became, for some people, more interesting. Some people were like, that's not the party band we grew up with. Whenever musicians tend to change, and I've talked to other really well-established musicians about this, there's almost not a permissiveness from some fans to grow and change and embrace multiple styles and embrace your musicality, and embrace that growth and bring it back to the fans. And some fan bases can be permissive with that. It depends on who you're catering to and knowing your audience, I suppose. But most musicians do tend to grow, but if they grow in a way that's not marketable for their fan base, that's when it becomes a problem, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. I've thought about that a lot of times, actually, and like what it means to be a working musician. Like you're a clinician, you're a teacher. I'm a teacher. I'm not a clinician. I haven't taught in a while, and now I actually do worship at my church, which I've never done before. And then we have there's just so many different ways that you can pursue musicianship as a career.
Yeah.
Just the most visible ones aren't always, they seem like the most sought after, but I mean, I'll be honest with you, like a Taylor Swift career is not what I would ever want. It isn't. I mean, I know she's a billionaire, but that's just not the kind of lifestyle or music I would ever want to create. It's not the kind of show I'd want to have. You know what I mean? And there's a market for it. And she was really brilliant in reinventing herself album after album, but it's still, she had a consistency in what she was doing. I call her the Disney trope because she basically she was the Disney princess to her audience, and then she grew up with them, and so she mirrored what they wanted to be while also having that girl next door look, and then just kept living through the next phase with them. And that kept her audience growing, in pace while never actually losing that cheerleader. I mean, for crying out loud, that's what she is still. She's, Kelsey and Swiftie,
I mean, she's gorgeous. The visual appeal is definitely universal with her. She ticks a lot of boxes. She's got the talent and she's got the business acumen. I throw no shade at Taylor Swift, but
billionaires make billionaires. Let's just put it that way. Okay, yes, but she comes from a ton of money, and they weren't gonna not teach her how to pay for her to make the money that she could earn.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair.
But yeah, I think she's a cultural anomaly musically, but I'm more of using that as a balance of inspiration for the world of musicianship and touring and stuff where we live, which is really you drive the road a lot, and you have to work to make money, and it's not, very few people are not working musicians. Let me put it that way. There aren't a lot of opportunities. You really are still on the gig economy, whether you're getting paid for your course or getting paid for your merchandise or whatever else.
Yeah, or just getting yourself in a position enough that your phone rings enough that you can actually do that. That's pretty, in its own way, magical to get those stars to align, that you just, can make that happen enough that your phone rings and you're like, oh, okay, that's the phone bill. Oh, that's the, and it just happens long enough it becomes a thing. That is hard. Yeah,
but the end of that road can be kind of scary if you're not smart about your retirement and proactive about it, right? Because you eventually you don't want to have to work till you're dead kind of deal. And at some point, presumably, you might not be able to. So you kind of have to get strategic about your provision and your lifestyle and your future in that way, you know?
Yeah. That is all true. I mean, there's a lot of things when I get students who are interested in this stuff about living well within your means, living very, very frugally. Even when you do have the cash, and then knowing to stock it away. And 9 times out of 10 when they're talking about that, there's some really good stuff about this. Trey Gunn talks about, there's a really great discussion he does online. It's a YouTube video called Original Voice. I send that to students to watch who are kind of interested in this path. James Pressfield, War of Art, that's another good one. Obviously, Atomic Habits, things like that. But one thing that Trey Gunn talks about is he's talking about the creation of Original Voice, creating something that hasn't been done before. And he mentions, sometimes, yes, you got to make money, but you've got to live so bare bones that when you do have money, that's how you're buying your time back to create the thing. Mm-hmm. And that's hard. On top of that, socking that cash away, if you're thinking about it, socking that cash away also so you have something down the road. It's really the same thing, but, you've got to just have something stashed away, so both retirement, but also the time to make the thing and also rest from when you are busy.
I thought about that. Having the space to be creative gets zapped because you do end up working so hard to get it out. This album that I've got coming out next year, again, 12 years, 15 years in the making between what is being written and all of that,
Yeah.
So tell me the number one thing that you would say has helped you further your career.
Ooh, the number one thing. I don't know if it's really... Okay, I'll give you a number one thing, but it just popped into my head. Probably a growth mindset.
Yeah. What did that look like for you?
So a ways back, I dated a gentleman who was working on his master's degree. And obviously we're not together anymore. But we did have in common was a real pursuit of mastery. And so we would spend a lot of time talking about it. Not just the 10,000 hours, but what does that look like? How does that form a career? How does that, shape things? And I think I was already hungry for it, but I think that really instilled, I don't want to just be an average bass player. I don't want to just be the whole, you can call me and I can play this. I want to show up and knock it out of the park. So I can't say the career has necessarily been exactly maybe a higher performing bass player I would like, but I can't say that I don't have the benefits. I've gone, studied extra, aligned myself with other bass players who could teach me things. And I've had lessons with Michael Manning. I've had lessons with Gerald Veasley. I have taken a longer stretch of time with lessons with Anthony Wellington, who was Victor Wooten's number 2 for a while. I've learned stuff by proxy from Brian Beller. So these are all ways to just get myself in the room and learn from these people. And that influenced me. And that also helped having the Virginia Bass Forum, having the conversations with those bass players afterwards. So it helps because you realize you don't know everything. And then you're also hungry to kind of learn what you don't know. And I found out that's kind of where your voice starts to develop more. Because you kind of wait, there's this little, there's Michael Mannering before he discovered conical, and then there's Michael Mannering post-conical when he's starting to master it, and that's kind of what I mean. He's Michael Mannering, but there's still something else he can learn. And you watch him internalize Indian rhythms and incorporate that into what he's already doing at a very high level. That's, growth mindset. It's amazing to watch others do it.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is there is no shortcut for time spent. There is no. You want the shortcut to success, but when it comes to playing the bass or musicianship or being an expert in something like this, there's no shortcut. It's time that you put in. And growth mindset, the pivotal thing about that is you hear this from experts all the time, but actually to embody it is different. There's always something else to learn. Yeah. Even if you're the best in the room in the world. And the people who are the best in the world understand that.
Yeah.
I remember watching that interview with Morgan Freeman. They were like, well, what's it like now that you've arrived? And he's like, what has arrived?
I've just arrived. That's funny.
That was a quick message. What do you mean arrived? What I was what are you talking about? And I'm not going to, I don't remember all his words, but I also think that there's this juxtaposition that we face, where we're in constant pursuit of, like, I've been in constant pursuit of music for all my life. But what's competing for my time to be the best I can with that, it ebbs and flows out of the seasons that may compete with that greater ambition, and be more important. For example, like my daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like her livelihood and her health and her wellness is more important than my aptitude on an instrument, and it always will be. So
Absolutely.
that's just what that is. And I but that doesn't mean I can't be excellent on an instrument or continue to pursue things, but it does introduce another variable that's competitive with the time you have to spend. But I think what I've kind of hit lately is all of that time spent in survival mode didn't necessarily have to be spent, but in and of itself was a teacher, right? Because then you do kind of become more efficient. It makes it easier to prioritize what you want. Because once things are gone, like your time is gone, you understand what you're not willing to sacrifice anymore, right? And I say this all the time with fitness, and like, people are like, well, I've just been so busy. I'm like, you do not have, I know you think you have the luxury right now of not exercising and being fit, but the reality is that if you don't have this, you don't have anything else.
Yeah.
So you really have to put it above everything else that you're doing, period.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even your musicianship, even your whatever, like if you don't have your health, you got nada.
Yeah, everything's harder immediately, compounded. So much harder.
You can't even parent if you don't prioritize your health. So that's kind of where, like, outside of that, but everything else just becomes in as I've been looking at my next 40 years, like thinking about where I've spent the first 40 and what I'm going to do with the next 40, what I'm not willing to sit on anymore, what I'm not willing to waste my time on anymore. And I don't want to say that it's an impatience, but it kind of is. It's kind of like...
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely does make sense. And it doesn't get any better as you get older. You know, we are both aware we've had friends pass, we've seen colleagues pass. I've got parents who are getting older. Opportunities slide by faster than you're going to realize. And that insistence you're feeling right now is your nervous system reminding you time is going by faster than you think. And it will not get better as you feel that timeline gets shorter.
You know, and there is like all of this thinking, like, I don't want to say that this isn't about the growth mindset or like to pull away from that, but the reality is that, Brittany, in the last 3 months, 4 people in my immediate group have passed, and I want to say 6 have in total. And I'm not going to say all of their names right now because it's not, you know, I don't feel like I'm doing any of their memories justice in the mentioning of it. But I literally went to 3 memorials in less than 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later found out another friend had passed. And these were all people that I was like close to, you know, like, at least in the community. Some of them I, you know, one of them I was closer to than others. It's not really about, they weren't necessarily people I talk to every day, but the music community is very special in this. Like when someone leaves, it's ruptured, you know, like that fabric of spirituality and comfort and connectivity is ruptured, and it hurts.
It does. Anthony Jackson passed at the beginning of the run of Godspell. I literally saw it at the end of one of our tech runs. I picked my phone up, walked over to another guitar player I know who'd know the name, and I just put the phone in front of him, and he was like, "Oh no!" So he was responsible for the development of the 6-string bass, so I owe him a lot. But that was the first big hit out of many hits that have been coming for both of us. So I bring up him because he's a public figure. I know you've had some things. I logged into Facebook and saw somebody else that I hadn't heard from a while, like this was yesterday. There was his obituary. I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
I saw one of those
nice
too.
Guy.
Yep. Yeah. It's been, the number is staggering and a little concerning. Like, I don't know, the last time I knew this many people this happened to me my freshman year in college. 9 people. I went to like 9 funerals. It was a lot. And I mean, these were people I really knew. And then because I went to a small high school, and oh my gosh. But anyway, it's just been a very interesting season. But I would say, and wrapping all of this up, that the community is one of the best parts of being a musician. You know, I'm reminded that every time I do go to a memorial service, or I talk to somebody about it, or I hear from someone about it. And we do continue to remember them in the musical pursuits. You never really get over it. so I let that go because I was like, there is no getting over it. There's just, I love this line, grief is like glitter. Like it just happens when it happens. And I let myself have that moment. And then I fuel it into the inspiration of like, and I think you said this to me, you're like, you wanted to come down and record, and I knew we both kind of needed it after Chris's passing. And it really was like a rallying of sorts, like we're going to do what we do and remember them in this while we still can, and that makes the moments and the time that you put into it in the future more, I don't know. I don't want to say that any moment's more valuable than the next, but I think you just grow and you look at it differently and you don't take it for granted, and you know what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And it isn't about achievement either. I was having this conversation. I was like, it's not about achievement. It's not about like, hey, I've got my name on a plaque. It's not about this award I won. It's about like, what is your impact?
It's the relief of knowing you stuck the landing. You got the thing done that's chewing at you that you have to get done.
Yeah. Which goes back to like your purpose, right? You're like seeking purpose, of your gifts and your stewardship. Right. I think that's all of this has been on my mind for a really long time, is like, how am I really stewarding these gifts? How am I really like being productive about it? And, for a while I was just doing the best I could to claw at it and stay where I was, because there was enough going on in my life that I could have given it all up. I refused to do that. And I'm proud of myself for not giving up. But now it's like, okay, what are you going to do to steward and honor and continue to be the best version of yourself, and what do you have to give up to do that, and how are you going to protect the time to maintain that, right?
When I got my first endorsement, another person we both know, I won't bring up their name, I just out of respect, but I had that bass in my hands at a rehearsal, and they said, you have to now do this for all of us who don't get those opportunities.
Yeah.
And, that's when you start feeling the responsibility of the community, because you get to do the dream. You get to do the dream. There's stewardship, there is responsibility in having access to those rooms and those gifts and those responsibilities, but also using that. I'm going to quote Victor Wooten on this, because this is the best way I've ever heard it. Let people put you on a pedestal, but then reach down and pull them up there with you. And that's like the best way to approach those situations, those opportunities. Okay, so I get to go and record with you in Virginia Beach. We put a video out. Who do we inspire to do a great thing from that? I've already heard from a couple people that's a new favorite version of that song, or that's a new favorite Christmas track this year. But
Yay.
Hopefully by hearing that, by stewarding those talents forward, who do we inspire to also show up and hopefully have a best version of themselves appear out of that?
I'll tell you what, though, in all of that, me just not giving the F up was just not giving up over this like past, and I think that's probably where I'll leave it today, over the past 15 years, through everything that I've been through, and you're aware of it, you've been through your share, like I continued to work, do what I needed to do. And how I showed up performing, like frequency wise, changed, but my commitment to it I just didn't give up.
Yeah. And it's not uncommon, even talking to compatriots online who are, my age, your age, or somewhere in between. It's really common on a 20, 30, 40, some odd, in some cases, year stretch of doing this, that they step back, regroup, take a break, get their head together, get their energy back together, because it's a constant, like, you're just constantly outputting, and then come back stronger. So there's no shame in that. If anyone's listening to this, by the way, I mean, I've known other musicians that, are doing great things, and they have said, I was at the quitting point, and they had to regroup and come back, or they had, something happen that made them realize that wasn't the thing to do, but you still have to sometimes take a moment and just get yourself right to continue the journey. And there's no shame in that. You're not quitting. And even if you do quit, by the way, there's no shame in that either, because sometimes that's the right choice.
Well,
but music will come back for you. That is the warning there. It will come back for you, and it will do it in a way that you will not be able to ignore it.
I mean, that feels pretty prophetic in and of itself. I For those who don't know, I am applying to medical school, and the odds look good. My grandmother was a doctor, and I have a great academic record, and that's a huge career change. But I know so many doctors who are musicians, many who, and I don't feel like I really am people driven in a way. Most people who know me know that, and so I know that I'm going to find a different level of fulfillment on this part of the path. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue down the musical path. It's just going to look a little different. And I think that that's kind of been pivotal too, is like, unless you are a Tedeschi Trucks or a Taylor Swift, I mean, even Tedeschi Trucks, they're a working band. Your career can be something that you architect, and we should probably talk about that on the next podcast.
Okay, all right. The part 2 has now been baked in.
We've talked about growth mindset, and then we can start talking about architecting, because I think that will be a very, very insightful. So, Brittany, I know that we could talk on and on and on and on and on about what it means to be a woman in the music industry, and we didn't even talk about that. So
that might be part 3. I don't know.
No, that's an ongoing forever conversation.
Okay.
And but I'm so glad to chat with you, and I hope that you have a great. I know you're hopping on teaching, and I'm going to go chat with a client. So
sounds good.
Don't forget to check out Lady Bass, ladybassmusic.net. Correct? Is that your website?
At ladybassmusic.net, and do not forget, check out Ashleigh Chevalier.
Yay! Yeah, we got our single up on iTunes and Spotify, and a really cool video on YouTube. Yeah, thanks for listening. Like, subscribe to the Unmasked podcast, and we'll talk to you later.
See you later.